So as I mentioned in a previous lesson, it's important to have strong documentation. So we're going to cover some best practices for documenting disciplinary issues as they come up. So remember that these are handled on a case-by-case basis. And some situations will result in immediate termination, such as gross misconduct. So before you conduct any verbal counseling session, it's really important to clearly identify and be able to articulate the issues with an employee. Verbal counseling is a session between the manager and the employee where it really may be the first time that an employee is being made aware that there is a performance issue. It is an opportunity for the manager and the employee to jointly discuss performance expectations, issues, and concerns. And we'll discuss that in a little bit more detail later. Written documentation would be when performance issues have been addressed in prior conversations and verbal counseling has already occurred, but the performance is still not meeting the expectations. You should implement a written documentation, which we'll discuss a little bit later. Written documentation should be followed up with coaching to really make sure that that plan is developed. So the first step is to identify the problem. You want to identify the specific problem and the feedback that needs to be delivered. The purpose of this step is to really prepare and clearly articulate that feedback prior to the delivery to the employee. That feedback should be specific, observable, and measurable. You want to document some bullet points for review. What did you observe, and what is the impact on the business? What actions does that employee need to take to correct the problem? So how do you articulate the issues? You want to state the observation and be very specific with examples of the behavior based upon what you actually observed yourself personally. So you want to state the impact to the business. You want to identify the business reason for sharing that feedback, and you want to be able to answer that "so what" from the employee's point of view. So meaning, why is this important and why is it an issue? What is the impact on the company and or the team? Then you want to define some corrective actions. You want to determine what actions are required to improve. You want to clearly state items that are specific with dates and times and places as examples. You want to have things that are observable, so behaviors that others can see, and things that are measurable, so success that can be clearly measured. It can be quantified or it's time-bound whenever possible. So step 2 is a verbal counseling. And the purpose of a verbal counseling is a coaching session to review observations, the impact, and corrective actions necessary. There's clear communications of expectations. You want to solicit the employee's input and develop an action plan to move forward. When you think about delivering feedback, it's not just what you say, it's also actions and behaviors. 55% of your message is body language, 38% is tone, and the rest is what you actually say, the words that you use. So if you have to deliver these messages on the phone, you won't have access to body language, so you just need to pay a little bit more attention to the other two components. And you also want to check in frequently to make sure that there's a clear understanding and ask a lot of questions. You'll want to follow up the verbal counseling session with an email documentation. So you'll want to have in that email the date and time of the meeting, the points that you covered, and also a date for a follow-up meeting. And be prepared to further clarify if there's any other counseling sessions necessary. Step 3 is written documentation. Typically this is going to follow a verbal counseling, and there are several possible formats which will always include the name, title, date of delivery, the reason for counseling and a description of the circumstances, the business impact, the corrective action necessary, next steps, and the consequences. So possible formats may be a letter to an employee, which is used for higher level positions, a record of counseling form, which is used for maybe a single instance, or a performance improvement plan, which really can be used if there are multiple instances or it's not the first time someone's been talked to about their performance. You want to use this to document the employee's performance areas that need improvement and things that are specific, observable, and measurable. You want to use examples of things that you've seen. You want to establish an action plan of what they need to do next. And you also want to consider additional resources and support, such as an employee assistance program. You want to have HR review, and then also make sure that when you're having this meeting and discussion, it's in a confidential setting. So the goals really are for improved performance, getting clarity of expectations, and an agreement on next steps. You need to be very clear about what the consequences are, and you want to make sure that the employee signs the document that's delivered. If they refuse to sign the document, you can make a note there, but you really want to let the employee know that they're signing this document as acknowledgement of a conversation. Step 4, coaching to the plan. You want to make sure you're having regular follow-up meetings, either weekly or bi-weekly with your employees. You want to discuss the progress that they're making towards that plan, solicit any input to them, reiterate the expectations you have, and follow up with a documentation email. So following these 4 steps, you should have a clear understanding of what you would need to do if you need to discipline an employee.